The Nexus Trading Hub was the largest space station in the known galaxy. It floated in neutral space, far from any planet or star system that belonged to a single species. Here, aliens from dozens of worlds came together to trade, talk, and live in peace. The station was a city in space, with markets, gardens, homes, and schools. Millions of beings walked its metal corridors every day. Among all these strange creatures from distant worlds, there was one small human girl named Emma Park. She was 8 years old, with dark hair that her father tied into 2 braids every morning. Her eyes were bright and curious, and she smiled at everyone she met. No matter how strange they looked, Emma had lived on Nexus Station for 2 years now. Her father, David Park, worked as Earth's trade ambassador. It was his job to make deals with alien species and keep peace between humanity and the rest of the galaxy. He was a tall man with a kind face, but there was something hard in his eyes, something that spoke of a difficult past. Before he became a diplomat, David had been a Marine. He had fought in wars that most people had forgotten. He had done things that he never talked about, not even to his daughter. Emma's mother had died 3 years ago from a sickness that even the best doctors could not cure. After that, David could not bear to be away from his daughter. When he got the job on Nexus Station, he brought Emma with him. Some people said it was dangerous to bring a child to a place so far from Earth. David did not care. Emma was all he had left in the universe, and he would keep her close. No matter what. Life on the station was good for Emma. She went to school with children from 12 different species. She learned to speak 3 alien languages. She made friends with beings that looked like nothing from Earth, creatures with scales and feathers and too many eyes. None of them scared her. Emma had grown up hearing stories about Earth, the planet that aliens called a Deathworld. Earth was famous across the galaxy, but not for good reasons. To most alien species, Earth was a nightmare. The gravity was too strong. The atmosphere was harsh. The weather could kill in 100 different ways. Hurricanes, tornadoes, floods, droughts, fires, and freezing cold. And then there were the animals. Predators with claws and teeth, venomous snakes, sharks in the oceans, and insects that spread disease. Even the plants on Earth could be deadly. Humans had evolved on this terrible world. They had survived everything their planet could throw at them. They had hunted the predators and tamed the land. They had built cities and machines and eventually ships that carried them to the stars. To the aliens of the galaxy, humans were something between amazing and terrifying. These soft-looking creatures came from a world that would kill most other species in days. Yet they smiled and laughed and made friends easily. Emma was the perfect example of this strange human nature. She was small and weak compared to most alien children. A Krell warrior could crush her with one hand. A Valari could outrun her without trying. But Emma was not afraid of any of them. She walked through the station like she owned it, chatting with merchants, playing games with alien children, and always ready with a smile. She also had a companion that fascinated every alien on the station. His name was Biscuit, and he was a golden retriever. To humans, Biscuit was just a friendly dog, a pet that loved to play fetch and nap in sunny spots. To aliens, Biscuit was proof that humans were insane. Dogs were pack predators. Their ancestors, wolves, were killing machines that hunted in groups and brought down prey much larger than themselves. Humans had taken these predators and turned them into friends. They lived with these animals in their homes. They let their children play with them. Biscuit followed Emma everywhere on the station. His tail wagged constantly, and he greeted every alien with the same friendly enthusiasm. Some species were terrified of him at first, but Emma always laughed and showed them that Biscuit was gentle. The dog would roll over for belly rubs from beings with tentacles, claws, or mechanical limbs. He did not care what anyone looked like. He just wanted to be petted. David watched his daughter grow and thrive on the station. And for the first time in years, he felt something like peace. Emma was happy. She was safe. The station had security forces from a dozen species, and violence was almost unheard of. What could possibly go wrong? Far from the peaceful corridors where Emma played, a warship hung in the darkness of space. It belonged to the Krell Dominion, one of the most feared empires in the galaxy. The Krell were conquerors. They had built their civilization on war and slavery. They took what they wanted and destroyed anyone who stood in their way. The Krell looked like nightmares given form. They stood 8 feet tall, with 4 powerful arms and bodies covered in thick armor plates. Their faces had no expressions that humans could read, just black eyes and mandibles that clicked when they spoke. They had conquered dozens of species and ruled their empire with absolute cruelty. Warlord Thax commanded this particular warship. He had won 17 campaigns and enslaved millions. His name was spoken with fear across 3 sectors of space. Now he sat in his command chamber, watching footage of a small human girl playing in a garden with her dog. His lieutenant stood nearby, waiting for orders. The ship had been watching Nexus Station for weeks, gathering information, looking for weaknesses. The human ambassador's child, the lieutenant said. She walks freely. No guards. No protection. Thax clicked his mandibles slowly. It was a sign of pleasure among his kind. Humanity has grown comfortable. They think this station is safe. They think the rules of the galaxy will protect them. What are your orders, Warlord? Thax had studied humans for months. He knew they were dangerous in battle, but he also knew they had a weakness. They cared too much. They formed bonds with their offspring, their mates, even their animals. This was foolish sentiment, the kind of thing that got species conquered. We will take the child, Thax announced. The human ambassador will give us whatever we demand to get her back. Trade agreements, technology, military secrets. Humans claim to value their young above all else. We will test that claim. The lieutenant bowed. I will prepare a strike team. 6 warriors. Full armor. Be quick and silent. The station security must not know until it is too late. As the warship moved closer to Nexus Station, Warlord Thax felt confident. This would be easy. Humans were not like the Crow. They were soft, emotional, and weak. Taking one small child would bring them to their knees. He had no idea what he was about to unleash. He did not understand that human softness was a mask, a comfortable disguise that hid something much older and darker. He did not know that evolution on a Deathworld had created the most dangerous predators in the galaxy. Creatures that smiled and laughed until you threatened what they loved. Then the smiles disappeared, and something else emerged. Warlord Thax would learn this lesson soon. He would learn it in blood and screaming, and the final moments of his life. But for now, he watched the footage of a little girl playing with her dog, and he saw only easy prey. The countdown to his death had begun. The botanical garden was Emma's favorite place on the whole station. It was a massive dome filled with plants from 100 different worlds. Trees with purple leaves grew next to flowers that glowed in the dark. Streams of water ran through the garden, and small bridges crossed over them. The air smelled sweet and fresh, not like the recycled air in the rest of the station. Emma sat on a soft patch of blue grass, her sketchbook open on her lap. Around her, a group of young Valari children watched as she drew. The Valari were a gentle species, tall and thin with silvery skin and large eyes. Their children were curious and playful, and they loved Emma's drawings. What is that? One of them asked, pointing at her picture. It's a horse, Emma said. They live on Earth. People ride them. The Valari children made sounds of amazement. The idea of climbing onto a large animal and riding it across the ground seemed both exciting and terrifying to them. Biscuit lay nearby, his head resting on his paws. His ears moved slightly every time a new sound reached them. Even relaxed, the dog was always alert. It was something built into his bones by thousands of years of living alongside humans. Emma did not notice the change at first. She was too focused on her drawing, trying to get the horse's mane just right. But Biscuit noticed. His head lifted, and his ears pointed forward. A low growl formed in his throat. The Volari children noticed too. Their large eyes turned toward the garden's main entrance, and what they saw made them freeze in fear. 6 crow warriors walked through the garden. They wore full combat armor, black and red, with weapons mounted on their arms. Their heavy boots crushed the delicate plants beneath them. They did not care about the garden's beauty or the rules of the station. They cared only about their mission. The Volari parents saw the warriors coming and grabbed their children. They ran, their long legs carrying them away as fast as possible. Screams echoed through the garden as other visitors fled. Within seconds, the peaceful place became a scene of panic. Emma looked up from her drawing. She saw the massive aliens approaching her, and her heart began to pound. She had never seen Krell warriors before, only pictures in her father's files. They were bigger in real life, scarier. Biscuit jumped to his feet and put himself between Emma and the warriors. He barked loudly, his fur standing up along his spine. He was not a fighting dog. He had never been trained for combat. But he was Emma's companion, and something ancient in his blood told him to protect her. The squad leader stopped a few feet away from the child. He looked down at her with his black eyes, seeing nothing but a small, weak creature. Easy to grab. Easy to control. "Human child," he said, his voice harsh and mechanical through his helmet's translator. "You will come with us. Your father will pay for your return." Emma felt tears forming in her eyes, but she remembered what her father had taught her. "If you are ever in danger," he had said, "if anyone ever tries to take you, you scream. You scream as loud as you can. Do not stop screaming until help comes." David had made her practice. He had taught her a specific sound, a pattern of screams that would trigger the station's emergency system. Any human on the station would hear it and know exactly what it meant. A child was in danger. Emma opened her mouth and screamed. The sound was high and sharp, and carried through the garden's dome. It bounced off the walls and traveled through the air vents. It was not just a cry for help. It was a signal, a call that went straight to the hearts of every human who heard it. The squad leader did not understand. To him, it was just noise, the weak crying of a frightened child. He stepped forward and swung his armored hand, striking Emma across the face. The blow sent her small body flying through the air. She landed hard on the ground, her sketchbook tumbling away. Pain exploded through her head, and she felt blood running from her lip. But she kept screaming. Biscuit attacked. The dog launched himself at the squad leader, his jaws finding a gap between armor plates. He bit down hard, and the Krell warrior roared in surprise. No creature this small had ever dared to attack a Krell. Another warrior kicked Biscuit away. The dog flew across the garden and hit a tree trunk with a terrible sound. He lay still, whimpering softly. Emma saw her friend fall, and her screams became sobs. But she had done what she needed to do. The signal had been sent. 2 corridors away, David Park was in a meeting with traders from a distant system. He was discussing shipping routes and tariffs, boring work that paid for his daughter's safety and happiness. His communicator sat on the table in front of him. When Emma's scream came through the speaker, David stopped mid-sentence. His face changed. The kind diplomat disappeared, and something else took his place. Something that the traders had never seen before and hoped to never see again. He was moving before anyone could speak. He ran out of the meeting room and down the corridor, his legs pumping faster than they had in years. His mind went quiet and cold. the way it used to during combat. All his training came back to him like it had never left. Around the station, other humans heard the same scream. A cook in the station's main restaurant dropped her knife and grabbed the cleaver. An engineer put down his tools and picked up a heavy wrench. The scientist closed her laptop and reached for a specimen container filled with acid. They did not speak to each other. They did not need to. They all knew what that scream meant. A human child was in danger. Nothing else mattered. Lisa Cooper was working in the hydroponics bay when she heard the signal. She had spent 12 years in the army before retiring to a peaceful life growing vegetables in space. She thought her fighting days were over. She was wrong. Lisa moved to her personal locker and opened it. Inside, hidden behind bags of seeds and plant food, was a rifle. She had kept it clean and loaded for 2 years, hoping she would never need it. Now she was glad she had. She checked the weapon quickly and began moving toward the botanical garden. Her mind calculated angles and distances, the old training coming back like muscle memory. She would find a high position, a good line of sight. She would wait for the right moment. Emily Foster was in the communications center when she heard Emma scream. Emily was small and quiet, the kind of person who disappeared into a crowd. But she had spent 6 years in military cyber warfare before taking this job. She knew how to break into computer systems and take control of machines. She sat down at her terminal and began typing. Her fingers flew across the keyboard as she reached out into the station's network. She needed to find the Krell ship. She needed to get inside its systems. By the time anyone realized what she was doing, she planned to own every computer the Krell had. All across Nexus Station, humans stopped what they were doing and began to move. They came from different jobs, different backgrounds, different parts of Earth. Some had military training. Some did not. It did not matter. A threat to one human child was a threat to all of them. This was not something they decided. It was something they felt in their bones, a response built by millions of years of evolution on the deadliest planet in the galaxy. The Krell had made a terrible mistake. They had studied humans from a distance and thought they understood them. They saw a species that smiled and made friends with everyone. They saw soft skin and weak bodies. They did not see what lay beneath. They did not understand that humanity's greatest strength was not their muscles or their weapons. It was their love for each other, especially for their young. That love was now turning into something else. Something ancient and dangerous. The hunt had begun. David Park ran through the corridors of Nexus Station like a man possessed. His feet pounded against the metal floor, and his breath came in sharp gasps. But his mind was calm and clear, colder than the void of space. He had trained for situations like this. Years ago, in places he never talked about, he had learned how to become something other than human. A machine made of flesh and bone, designed only to kill. He had buried that part of himself when he became a father. When he held his daughter for the first time and felt her tiny hand wrap around his finger, now that part of him was waking up. 3 Krell guards stood at the entrance to the botanical garden. They were supposed to be watching for trouble, making sure no one interrupted the kidnapping. They saw David coming down the corridor, a single human in civilian clothes, no weapons visible. They laughed. The first guard stepped forward to stop him. David did not slow down. He grabbed the guard's weapon arm and twisted. The sound of breaking bone echoed through the corridor. Before the guard could scream, David had taken his weapon and shot him through the head. The second guard raised his own weapon, but David was already moving. He fired twice, hitting the guard in the chest and throat. The Krell armor was strong, but David knew where the weak points were. He had studied their species. He had prepared for this moment without even knowing it. The third guard tried to run. David caught him from behind and wrapped his arms around the alien's neck. He squeezed. The Krell was bigger and stronger, but David knew exactly how to cut off blood to the brain. In seconds, the guard went limp. David dropped the body and walked into the garden. His hands were covered in alien blood, purple and thick. His clothes were stained. His face showed no emotion at all. He was not David Park anymore, not the kind ambassador who made friends with alien traders. He was something older, something that humans had been since they first learned to pick up rocks and throw them at predators inside the garden. The squad leader held Emma against his chest. A blade pressed against her small throat. The other 5 Krell warriors stood around him, their weapons ready. Emma saw her father and tried to call out to him, but the blade pressed harder, and she went silent. Tears ran down her cheeks. Her lip was swollen from where she had been hit. Her eyes were full of fear, but also hope. Daddy was here. Daddy would save her. This kid lay nearby, still breathing but badly hurt. The dog tried to lift his head when he smelled David approaching, but he was too weak. He whimpered softly. "Human," the squad leader said loudly. "Stop where you are. Drop your weapon. If you take one more step, I will cut this child's throat." David stopped. He looked at his daughter, taking in every detail. The bruise forming on her face, the blood on her lip, the terror in her eyes. Something inside him went very quiet. "You hit my daughter," he said. His voice was flat, without anger or fear. It was the voice of someone stating a simple fact. She would not stop screaming. It was necessary. "You hurt her dog." The squad leader clicked his mandibles in confusion. Why was this human talking about an animal? "The beast attacked us. We defended ourselves." David nodded slowly. He seemed almost calm, which made the Krell warriors nervous. This was not how prey was supposed to act. This human should be begging, crying, offering anything to save his offspring. "Let her go," David said. "Let her go, and I will kill you quickly. That is the best offer you will get." The squad leader laughed, a harsh clicking sound. "You are one human. We are 6 Krell warriors. You cannot even save yourself, let alone this child." A shot rang out from above. Lisa Cooper had found her position on the garden's upper level, hidden among the artificial trees. She had a clear line of sight to the squad leader's head. She had waited for the right moment, the perfect moment when David would distract them. The bullet hit the squad leader in his secondary brain, located at the back of his skull. It was a target that most shooters would miss. Lisa did not miss. The squad leader's grip loosened for just half a second. That was enough. David crossed the distance between them in a heartbeat. He grabbed Emma and pulled her away from the falling alien. He shoved her behind a large plant and turned to face the remaining warriors. "Stay down, sweetheart," he said softly. "Close your eyes. Don't look." Emma buried her face in her hands and closed her eyes tight. She heard sounds she would never forget. Gunshots, screams, the wet sound of flesh being torn. Her father's breathing steady and controlled, even as violence exploded around him. The other humans arrived. They came from different directions, each finding their own path to the garden. The cook had her cleaver. The engineer had his wrench. The scientist had her container of acid. They were not soldiers, but they were humans, and they knew how to kill. The 5 remaining Krell warriors faced 15 humans. The aliens had armor and weapons and training. The humans had rage and love and millions of years of evolution on a planet that killed weaklings. It was not a fair fight. The Krell never had a chance. The battle lasted 43 seconds. When it was over, 6 Krell warriors lay dead on the garden floor. Their blood pooled among the alien plants, mixing with the water from broken streams. David knelt beside his daughter. His hands were shaking now, the adrenaline wearing off. He was covered in blood that was not his own. He looked like something from a nightmare, but his voice was gentle when he spoke. "Emma, sweetheart, it's over. You can open your eyes." Emma looked up at her father. She saw the blood on his face and clothes, but she did not care. She threw her arms around his neck and held on tight, sobbing into his shoulder. "Daddy, I was so scared. They hurt me. They hurt Biscuit." David held her close, one hand stroking her hair. "I know, baby. I know. But you were so brave. You did exactly what I taught you. Is Biscuit okay?" David looked over at the dog. Lisa was already there, checking the animal carefully. She looked up and gave a small nod. The dog was hurt, but he would live. "Biscuit is going to be fine," David told his daughter. "The doctors will fix him up." Emma cried harder with relief. Around them, the other humans stood in silence, catching their breath. None of them spoke. They did not need to. They had done what needed to be done. But David was not finished. He looked down at his daughter's bruised face, at the blood on her lip, and felt the cold rage return. The squad leader was dead, but he had not ordered this attack. Someone else was responsible. Someone else had decided to hurt his child. "Where's their ship?" David asked quietly. Lisa answered. "Docked at the outer ring. Security feeds show a small strike vessel." David nodded. He kissed Emma's forehead and handed her to Lisa. "Take care of her." "I'm not done yet." "David," Lisa said carefully, "what are you going to do?" He looked at her with eyes that had no warmth left in them. "I'm going to find whoever ordered this. And I'm going to make sure no one ever thinks about hurting a human child again." He walked out of the garden, and the other humans followed. They left behind 6 dead Krell warriors and a destroyed garden, but they took something with them. A message. A promise. A warning. The galaxy was about to learn what happened when you threatened humanity's young. The lesson would be written in blood. Warlord Thax sat in his command chamber aboard the warship, waiting for good news. His strike team should have captured the human child by now. They should be on their way back to the ship, ready to jump to hyperspace before the station's security could respond. Instead, his communicator filled with static and screaming. "Squad leader, report," Thax commanded. "What is happening?" No response. Just noise and then silence. Thax felt something he had not felt in many years. A small seed of doubt. He called his lieutenant forward. "Contact the strike vessel. Get me a status report." The lieutenant worked at his console for several minutes, his 4 hands moving quickly over the controls. When he looked up, his face showed confusion. "Warlord, I cannot reach the strike vessel. All communications are down." "What do you mean, down?" "Someone has blocked our signals. I cannot reach our team on the station. I cannot reach her ship in the docking bay. We are blind." Thax stood from his chair, his massive body tense with sudden anger. This was not possible. The Krell had the best technology in the sector. No one could simply cut their communications. On Nexus Station, Emily Foster sat at her terminal with a small smile on her face. Her fingers danced across the keyboard as she dug deeper into the Krell systems. She had broken their encryption in the first 3 minutes. Now she was inside their networks, seeing everything, controlling everything. "Security cameras on the strike vessel," she muttered to herself. "Let's see what we're working with." The images that appeared on her screen made her smile grow wider. 15 humans were boarding the small Krell ship in the docking bay. They moved quickly and silently, like predators stalking prey. David Park led them, a captured weapon in his hands and murder in his eyes. Emily switched her attention to the main warship floating in space nearby. She began to work on their systems, planning viruses and backdoors. By the time the humans reached the warship, she wanted to own every computer on board. "Weapon systems," she said quietly. "Targeting sensors, navigation, life support." Her fingers moved faster. All mine now. On the strike vessel, the small Krell crew never knew what hit them. There were only 12 of them, mostly technicians and pilots. They were not warriors. They did not stand a chance against 15 furious humans. David killed the first two himself, moving through the ship like a ghost. He shot one in the head and broke the other's neck with his bare hands. Behind him, the other humans spread out, clearing every room, every corridor. The ship's captain tried to send a distress signal. Mark Rivera, a quiet accountant who had spent 4 years in the Marines, stopped him with a knife to the throat. The signal never went out. 7 minutes after they boarded, the strike vessel was theirs. 12 Krell crew members lay dead, and the humans had not lost a single person. David stood at the pilot's controls and plotted a course. The warship hung in space nearby, massive and threatening. 300 warriors waited inside, ready to protect their warlord. "Are you sure about this?" Lisa asked him. "There's only 15 of us." David looked at her with dead eyes. "They hurt my daughter. They made her cry." He turned back to the controls. "I could do this alone if I had to." The strike vessel detached from the station and moved toward the warship. On the bridge of the larger ship, Warlord Thax watched it approach on his view screen. His confusion grew with every second. "Why is our ship coming to us?" he demanded. "I gave no such order." "Warlord," his weapons officer said carefully, "I am detecting human life signs aboard the strike vessel." Thax froze. That was impossible. His warriors would never allow humans to take their ship. Unless the warriors were already dead. "Destroy it," he ordered. "Fire all weapons. Blow that ship out of space." The weapons officer worked at his console, then looked up with fear in his eyes. "Warlord, our targeting systems are not responding. I have no control over our weapons." "What?" "Navigation is also offline. Life support is. Someone else is controlling our systems." Thax roared with rage, his forearms smashing against his command chair. How? Who is doing this? Far away on Nexus Station, Emily Foster hummed a little song to herself as she watched the Krell warship go blind and helpless. She had spent years learning how to break into enemy systems. The Krell thought they were safe. They thought their technology was superior. They were wrong. The strike vessel docked with the warship. The airlock opened, and 15 humans stepped aboard. Warlord Thax sent every warrior he had to stop them. 300 Krell soldiers, the finest fighters in his command, armored and armed with the best weapons their empire could provide. The battle moved through the warship like a storm. Corridor by corridor, room by room, the humans advanced. They were not an army. They were not soldiers. They were something worse. They were parents, brothers, sisters, aunts, uncles. They were people who had seen a child hurt, and they would not stop until every being responsible was dead. David led the way, moving through the ship with terrible efficiency. He shot enemies from a distance and killed them with his hands when they got close. He took wounds that would have stopped most people, but he did not feel them. He felt nothing except the cold fire that burned in his chest. Lisa followed behind, her rifle finding targets that others missed. She shot warriors through gaps in their armor, through windows, through walls. She did not miss the cook, whose name was Maria Santos, used her cleaver like she was cutting meat. Because that was all these aliens were to her now. Just meat that needed to be cut. The engineer, Tom Wilson, swung his wrench and broke bones. He had built machines his whole life. Now he was taking things apart instead. 6 minutes. That was how long the battle lasted. 6 minutes of chaos and blood and screaming. 300 Krell warriors, the pride of the Dominion, fell to 15 humans. When it was over, the survivors found themselves standing on the bridge of the warship. Bodies covered the floor. The walls were painted with purple blood. The smell of death filled the air. Warlord Thax stood alone in the center of the room, surrounded by the bodies of his personal guards. He held his ceremonial blade, a weapon that had killed dozens of enemies over his long career. His 4 arms were ready to fight. "I am Warlord Thax of the Krell Dominion," he announced, his voice still proud despite everything. "I have conquered 17 star systems. I have crushed species beneath my feet. I will not die to a handful of soft humans." David walked toward him slowly. His clothes were torn and covered in blood. A wound on his arm dripped red. But his face showed no pain, no fear, no mercy. "You sent your warriors to take my daughter," David said. "You ordered them to hurt her, to kidnap her, to use her against me. It was strategy. It was war. You would have done the same." David shook his head. "No, I would never harm a child. No human would. That is the difference between us." Thax raised his blade. "Fight me then. Face me like a warrior." David shot him in the knee. The warlord fell, screaming. His blade dropped from his hand. He tried to reach for it, but David stepped on his arm. "You hit my daughter," David said quietly. "Your warriors made her bleed. They made her cry. They hurt her dog." He leaned down, his face close to the warlord's. "For that, you die. But not quickly. Not easily. The execution took time." David made sure of that. He wanted the warlord to understand exactly what he had done wrong before the end. When it was finally over, David stood up and looked at the other humans. They were all wounded, all exhausted, all covered in blood that was not their own. But they were alive. All 15 of them. "Cut off his head," David said. "We're bringing it back to the station." No one argued. No one questioned. They understood what this was. A message. A warning. A promise to every species in the galaxy. This is what happens when you touch our children. Tom. Wilson found tools in the ship's engineering bay. The work did not take long. 20 minutes later, the strike vessel was heading back to Nexus Station. In its cargo hold, mounted on a metal pole, was the head of Warlord Thax. The Krell Dominion's warship drifted in space, empty except for the dead. Its lights flickered. Its systems failed one by one. Eventually, it would fall into the nearest star and burn to nothing. No one would mourn it. No one would remember the 300 warriors who died there. They were just the price of a lesson that the galaxy needed to learn. The Galactic Council met in an emergency session 3 hours after the attack. Representatives from 47 species filled the Great Chamber, a massive room at the heart of Nexus Station designed to hold beings of every shape and size. The ceiling rose hundreds of feet above, covered in lights that looked like stars. The floor was arranged in circles, with each species having their own section. Today, every eye in the room was focused on the human delegation. David Park stood at the center of the chamber. He had not changed his clothes or cleaned the blood from his skin. He looked like what he was, a predator who had just finished hunting. His eyes moved across the room, meeting the gaze of every alien who dared to look at him. Emma stood beside him, holding his hand tightly. She was scared of all the aliens staring at her, but she felt safe with her father. She knew he would never let anyone hurt her again. A bandage covered the cut on her lip, but the bruise on her face was still visible. Behind them, mounted on a ceremonial pole, hung the head of Warlord Thax. His black eyes were empty now. His mandibles hung open. Purple blood had dried around the cut where his neck used to be. The chamber was silent. No one spoke. No one moved. The other species had heard the stories of what happened, but seeing the proof was something else entirely. Finally, the Valari ambassador rose from his seat. The Valari were known for their wisdom and their long memories. They had watched the rise and fall of many species over thousands of years. 15 humans, the ambassador said softly, his voice carried through the chamber by hidden speakers. 300 Krell warriors. 6 minutes. He paused, letting the numbers sink in. The child was harmed? David nodded. She was struck in the face. Her dog was injured. A sound moved through the chamber, something like a gasp, but made by dozens of different species at once. Many of them had seen Emma playing in the station's corridors. They had watched her feed her dog, draw pictures, make friends with their own children. She was known to all of them. And now they understood what humanity was willing to do to protect her. Another ambassador stood, a creature made mostly of crystal that caught the light in beautiful ways. Ambassador Park, they said. The Krell Dominion is a major power in this galaxy. They control 12 star systems. They have thousands of warships. This action, the political implications, are not my concern, David said. His voice was flat and cold, the same voice he had used in the botanical garden, the same voice he had used while executing Warlord Thax. My concern is that my daughter was taken from a protected station. My concern is that she was hurt. My concern is that every species in this galaxy understands what happens when you threaten human young. He gestured at the head behind him. This is my message. Share it with everyone. Tell the Krell. Tell every species in every system. Human children are not to be touched. Human families are not to be threatened. If you break this rule, there is no army large enough to protect you. There is no place far enough to hide. The chamber stayed silent. The aliens looked at each other, at the head of the dead warlord, at the small girl holding her father's hand. Emma tugged at David's arm. He looked down at her, and something changed in his face. The cold predator disappeared, replaced by a tired father who loved his daughter more than life itself. Daddy, Emma said quietly. Her voice picked up by the speakers and carried through the room. Is Biscuit going to be okay? David smiled for the first time since the attack. He knelt down so he was at her level, ignoring the watching aliens, ignoring the blood on his clothes, focusing only on his little girl. The doctors say he's going to be fine, sweetheart. He was very brave. He protected me. He did. He's a good dog. Emma smiled, despite everything. Can we go see him? Soon, baby. Very soon. We just need to finish talking to these people first. The Valari ambassador watched this exchange with something like wonder in his large eyes. He turned to his aide, a younger Valari who carried a recording device. Note for the official records, the ambassador said quietly. Humanity is classified as a Deathworld species. They are apex predators. They form pack bonds with their young, their mates, and even members of other species. Including animals, sir? The ambassador glanced at Emma, remembering the golden dog that followed her everywhere. Especially animals. Add a special warning about their pets. Harming a human's pet seems to be almost as dangerous as harming their children. The aide made notes quickly. Around the chamber, other representatives were doing the same thing. Every species would update their files on humanity after today. Every diplomatic protocol would be rewritten. Every military assessment would be changed. A new representative stood. This one was from the Molteri Collective, a species that had fought against the Krell for generations. They looked like balls of living fire, dangerous and beautiful at the same time. The Molteri wish to express our gratitude to Ambassador Park, the representative said. The Krell have been our enemies for centuries. To see their warlord brought low by 15 humans, the fire flickered in what might have been a smile. It gives us hope. David nodded once. The Krell attacked my daughter. They would have done the same to any species they thought was weak. We are not weak. Clearly not. The Molteri would like to discuss an alliance with humanity. a formal partnership against the Krell Dominion. That decision is above my rank, David said. But I will pass your request to Earth's government. The session continued for another hour, with various species asking questions, making statements, and carefully not threatening anything related to human children. By the end, the message was clear. Every representative understood what had happened and what it meant. When the session finally closed, David picked up Emma and carried her out of the chamber. The other humans followed, leaving the head of Warlord Thax mounted where it stood. It would remain there for years, a reminder to every species who passed through the station. 3 days later, the Krell Dominion sent an official message to Earth government. They apologized for the attack on Emma Park. They offered to pay reparations. They requested peace and promised that no Krell ship would ever threaten a human again. David read the message and sent back a single word in response: acceptable. Life on Nexus Station slowly returned to normal. The botanical garden was repaired. The bodies were removed and sent back to their families. The blood was cleaned from the corridors and the walls. Emma went back to school. She played with her alien friends. She learned new languages and drew pictures of horses for the Valari children. She was still scared sometimes, especially at night, but her father was always there to hold her and tell her that everything was okay. Biscuit recovered from his injuries. For a few weeks, he walked with a limp and tired easily. But dogs are stronger than they look, and soon he was back to his old self, following Emma through the station, wagging his tail at everyone he met. The other humans on the station became closer after the attack. They had dinner together every week, sharing food and stories. They never talked about what they had done on the Krell warship. They did not need to. They had all been there. They all remembered. Somewhere in the vastness of space, in war rooms and council chambers, in the strategic planning offices of 100 species, new orders were being written. New protocols were being created. New warnings were being added to every file that mentioned humanity. The words were different in each language, but the meaning was always the same. Humans from Earth are Deathworld apex predators. They are cooperative hunters who form pack bonds with their young, their mates, and other species. They appear soft and friendly until threatened. Do not threaten them. Do not harm their children. Do not touch their pets. If you break these rules, there is no force in the galaxy that will save you from what comes next. The stars continue to shine, cold and distant, as they always had. Ships moved between them, carrying trade and travelers and the dreams of countless species. But now, those stars held a new understanding, a new respect. A new fear dawned in her room on Nexus Station. Emma Park slept peacefully, Biscuit curled up at her feet. Her father sat beside her bed, watching her breathe, making sure she was safe. He would always make sure she was safe, and somewhere in the back of every alien mind across the galaxy, a simple truth had been carved in blood and fire and the screams of dying warriors. You do not touch human children. Ever. The galaxy had received its message, and it would never forget.